Alex Garland is one of the more unique modern directors, with all of his films generating some kind of conversation, whether that is through controversy or just pure brilliance, sometimes even both. There is a conversation to be had after watching one of his films. So naturally his latest and potentially final film was highly anticipated. Civil War has now hit theatres, and with that I look to rank all 4 of his films that he's directed. He's been part of so many great films in terms of writing and producing, but today we're going to be looking at just the films that he's directed, so these ones that are up on screen now are the ones that we'll be covering. With that in mind, please let me know what yours is down below. I'd really like to hear what you have to say. As mentioned, his work is very interesting, so I'd imagine that some of these are all over the place, you know, no one's ranking is the same, and that will go for the same for mine because I don't look to ruffle any feathers, but it may potentially happen. So without further ado, let's get into my ranking of all 4 Alex Garland directed movies.
The words I have to say may well be simple.
So easily in last place I have Men. Now the score looks a bit brutal that I've given Men, but I'll be honest, there is a lot that I really like about this film. The big standout for me is the cinematography. From start to finish, it is top class. It really utilizes the English countryside very well, and as someone who both English and lives in England, it was really nice to see that represented on screen. And alongside that cinematography, the way they really brought out those colors, especially the green, it just made it really nice to look at. And it was a nice contrast as well, having this really beautiful cinematography next to these eerie horror elements which are subtly there, and the way they just kind of increase over time. It is obvious what this film is conveying, and initially it does that very subtly, which I appreciated because it's dealing with some very heavy material, and sometimes less is more, and I thought it found a nice balance for the majority of this film. It felt huge amounts of tension throughout the majority of the runtime as well, but it's when the film enters its final act it really falls apart. Now I know reviews haven't been too kind of this film, so I don't think I'm saying this in any controversial way, but after such a strong, I don't know, previous hour and a half of the film, maybe hour, as I said, less was more, and it did a very good job at that. Then in this final act it really shoves what it was going for in your face. It brings out some really unsettling horror moments, which I guess they achieved my goal of disturbing me, but at the same time they took me out of the experience and to a point where I didn't enjoy it. It was obvious that this film was building up to something, but the way it played out, none of us could have seen the way it happened, and I think that's the problem. I feel like the aim was to really shock audiences, even if it didn't kind of satisfy them. So I felt like Men went for shock factor in the end and really disturbed me. I was also letting me down on what had previously built up throughout the whole film. But despite this, I thought the 2 leads were fantastic. Jessie Buckley and Rory Kinnear, they're both great in their roles. We obviously have Buckley, this grieving widow, but then as things progress we learn more about her side of the story, and not to mention Kinnear and all these different roles. Every one of them he brought something new and perfected them all. So this is one of the weirder films I've reviewed because it feels like most of the things I'm saying are positive, but I feel like the way it ended, the direction it went in, just everything that happened really damaged my perception of this film. I just in the end felt quite miserable watching it, and not in the way that was effective.
He runs, wishing he could fly.
Now I think this is my first controversial pick on this list. Annihilation in second last. Now it's not a bad film by any means. I really appreciate a lot about it. Once again, visually stunning. We have some great performances, huge amount of tension throughout the whole duration, and once again the colour palette is mesmerising. Yet the rest of the film is where I'm mixed on. It was very hard to pinpoint what I didn't connect with this film entirely, and I think it was the story. There were ideas both interesting yet confusing, and for the most part I didn't resonate too well with it. I didn't find myself really engaged in what was happening. Yes, I felt the kind of suspense of everything, but the general story I wasn't too intrigued in. Things I did find interesting came about from an uneven pace. When it wasn't that I was focusing on, the characters I found to develop in a very inconsistent way, so I wasn't latching onto the story or the characters, therefore I just felt like the whole thing was very uncohesive. But Annihilation has the look of some of the greatest sci-fi films, and I know amongst many that this is considered one of their favourites because I've seen the reviews, I've seen the ratings. It's very hit or miss whether you absolutely love this film or it doesn't resonate with you as much. I'm in the latter for that matter. Like every film on this list, I absolutely love the colour and the cinematography, but the story, I didn't connect to it as much as I wanted to and as much as I probably should have on paper. And it tells you about the pace if I felt like the film overall was a bit bloated when the runtime was, I think, just under 2 hours. Controversial pick number 3 is having Ex Machina in second and not in first place. I know many people love this film and I can see why. I only watched it for the first time in preparation for this video, so probably about, in fact I can see it on my screen here, 24th of April, so just about a week ago as of filming. AI has been covered a lot in film over the years, whether that's in sci-fi form back in the 80s or more modern interpretations. However, Ex Machina really focuses in on the drama side and doesn't really deliver any action at all until the very end, as that's not the type of film it's going for. This film's core is built on these 3 characters and the dynamic they all share. There's a real sense of shadiness and a lack of trust amongst the 3 of them, or maybe 2. It just makes every interaction so fascinating because you don't know what is true, what is not, and what is kind of used to manipulate someone. Those 3 leads being Oscar Isaac, Alicia Vikander, and Domhnall Gleeson. They are all superb. They have fantastic chemistry with one another, whether that's being quite close in a romantical sense or just friendly, or, as I've mentioned, kind of a more sinister interaction between 2 characters. There is such an unsettling tone throughout the whole film, and I feel like it really comes from there, as do many of the great story beats as well. It's a beautifully crafted story from start to finish, with superb dynamics and cinematography, not to mention acting as well. Highlights the beauty and terror of AI and what we need to be aware of going forward as humans. Yeah, I feel a bit disappointed that I didn't enjoy it more. However, I do feel over the years when I do rewatch this film, I will enjoy it more. But as of now, I've had to lock it in at second place, to probably many people's annoyance. Which leaves us with Civil War coming in at first place. Alex Garland's most recent and probably final film. But he's covered AI, he's covered relationship trauma, and he's covered some weird, wacky, uncharted territory in the sci-fi genre. All of those taking us into some bizarre scenarios and outcomes. Civil War is his most grounded film, a very political film. Wagner Moura, Kaylee Spaney, and of course Kirsten Dunst are all fantastic in this film. Just like in Ex Machina, these 3 leads really shine and lead the film well, with Dunst really showcasing absolute tragedy and flaws of a character in her profession, where there's a real ruthlessness, there's in occasions no mercy, just the ambition to get the job done. Not much is learnt from her character's personal life, but the small fragments you do get really tell you the story and develop her character nicely, because you can kind of work out what kind of person she is and see how career focused she is. Alongside this, Civil War probably wisely leaves out any political stance or point of view, as I think this is a good way to avoid controversy, but also it's proven that it's not really needed. You know, if you have a neutral perspective, you can get to see many different sides of things. I thought it was for the best as well. It's like a point that doesn't need to be spoken about in any of these films because it applies to every single one of them. The cinematography is once again immaculate. Whether that is the way an action scene is shot, you know, showcasing the horrors or the brutality of war, or the more quieter shots, ones which kind of speak 1,000 words without saying anything, when it's just previously populated area, just abandoned from warfare, it's empty. This feeling of hopelessness runs through the entire film, and none of them sum up better than these images. If it is to be Alex Garland's last film, it's a great film to go out on. Probably one that not many will agree as his best, but for my personal enjoyment from this point in time, I did enjoy it the most out of the bunch. Felt very captivated in what he was able to create, and that's no disrespect to Ex Machina because I felt the same. Just Civil War I felt more emotional connection to and had more of a thriller after coming out of the cinema having seen it. So yeah, there's my ranking of Alex Garland's films. Of the 4, I think I've annoyed people on about 3 of my placements, so that's probably a new record for me. He's a controversial director in the sense of his films, not his personal life, you know. Garland has a very unique style and isn't afraid to push for things. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, and I really appreciate that. I want to see more directors like that in Hollywood at the moment, because, you know, one of the best things about films is the discussion you can have is the different perspectives you can have, whether that's good or bad. You know, as I said, I didn't like Men in the end, I didn't like the way it finished, but I really appreciate that it exists because it's something different. Up until the ending, it was capturing my interest. He ever makes another film, which, to be honest, even though he says he won't, I think he will, because that seems to be the general stuff. He's still quite young. Yeah, so if he happens to make any more films in the future, maybe I can make another ranking and we'll see if my opinion on any of this has changed, and maybe Ex Machina will be at the top like it is for many people. But yeah, I don't think many people are going to like the fact that I have Civil War in first place, but nonetheless, that is how I feel, and I wouldn't lie to you guys. So please let me know what your ranking is down below. Please like and subscribe, that would mean a lot. And yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll hope to see you in my next video.